You should be all set. Are you two going to be okay if I leave now? Jerry asked, already heading for the door. Yeah, it sounds simple enough. Run through our routines and follow the instructions. Piece of cake, Zach replied, smirking and folding his arms across his chest. Yeah, we'll be fine. Thanks for showing us the ropes, I said, offering a wave. As Jerry walked out the door, he paused, turning to face us for a moment. He had a grave expression written across his withered face. This goes without saying, but make sure you follow the rules to the letter. I've seen too many young, bright-eyed kids like yourselves come back here under different circumstances. The way he said that sent a shiver down my spine. There was a cold finality in his words with a hint of sorrow splashed in. He had seen some things. Before either of us could respond, the door slammed shut and we were left completely alone. What was that all about? Is he saying that we'll die if we don't follow those dumb rules? Old man's full of it, Zach huffed, shaking his head. I pursed my lips. Maybe he just wants us to be cautious. I mean, they're probably common-sense safety measures, but I bet Jerry's witnessed his fair share of accidents over the years. I'm sure he's trying to watch out for us. Yeah, you've got a point. He didn't have to be so dramatic about it, though, Zach replied, his arms still crossed. Hey, I don't mind a little drama every once in a while. It shows character. And by the way, have you read these yet? I asked, picking up a sheet that had the word Monday printed on the top in large, bold font. Hit me with them. What's the damage? Zach asked. I hurriedly scanned the page, involuntarily furrowing my brows. The more I soaked in, the further I got, and the more confused I became. A sense of unease crept over me as I began to read aloud. Rule number 1. Start your patrol 15 minutes after 10. A little girl will approach you while performing this task. Do not speak to her. Rule number 2. A demon will present itself to you at some point during your shift. Place a holy talisman around your neck, and it will not be able to cause you harm. Failure to do so may result in possession and/or death. Rule number 3. Ensure that you're locked inside the guard shack with the door securely locked by exactly 2:37 a.m. Do not step outside for any reason until 2:42 a.m. Restless spirits tend to get grumpy at the beginning of the week. Below the list of instructions was a hastily scrawled addition. Rule number 4. Bring a copy of these directions with you and stay together at all times. I locked eyes with Zach as I finished reading the rules to him. His expression matched mine before a smirk inched across his lips. He began laughing, tears welling in his eyes as I stood and stared blankly at him. What a load of crap! Do they seriously expect us to believe any of this? A demon presenting itself to us? I mean, come on. I've heard of rookie hazing, but this is a bit much, don't you think? Well, yeah, it does seem a bit wacky, I said, pulling out a drawer. But on the astronomically slim chance that this isn't a prank, I would rather be safe than sorry. I produced a large Ziploc bag from the drawer and held it up for Zach to see. Somebody had slapped a piece of tape on the front and written talisman in black Sharpie across it. Zach scoffed as I plucked out a tarnished gold amulet inscribed with some sort of ancient writing. Really? You're buying into this? Sort of. I mean, what are you afraid of? Being a little too fashionable, I retorted, displaying my fresh new bling. Zach couldn't help but grin. Fine, whatever. Give me one of those, he relented, fishing in the bag before producing his own talisman. Zach's was shaped like a cross with faded green emeralds encased within. See? Now, was that so hard? If you're done being a drama queen, let's get the show on the road, I said, pointing at the clock on the wall. 10:05 on the nose, Zach mumbled incoherently to himself before reluctantly trudging to the door. I snagged the list of rules before following him outside. The cemetery was eerily silent. It was summertime, so I would have expected to hear some sort of insects, frogs, or owls. Something. But the only noise I picked up was that of our footsteps, my own breathing, and the occasional light howl of the breeze as it swept through the grass. If I wasn't in a graveyard in the middle of the night, I probably would have found it peaceful. Hey Nate, Zach asked, shattering the silence. What's up? I replied, shining my flashlight between tombstones. Did you ever think that maybe this job might be a little, I don't know, too easy? We're getting paid quite a bit, and it doesn't seem like we have to do that much. Protecting a giant yard full of dead people can't be that demanding, right? I bit my lower lip. Now that he mentioned it, something did seem strange about the position. The salary-to-work ratio wasn't adding up. I don't know. Maybe this rule thing is legit. That, or they could have a high turnover rate. Think about it. Not many people want overnight shifts, and plenty of folks wouldn't set foot in a cemetery after dark if their lives depended on it. That seemed to ease his tension a bit. You're probably right. People get spooked easily and that has to be it. What has to be it? Zach and I stopped dead in our tracks. We slowly turned to each other, our faces pale as sheets. The voice of a young girl drifted from directly behind us. I gulped, and Zach's teeth began to chatter. Neither of us had the slightest idea what to do. Hello? Why aren't you saying anything? I mustered up all the courage I had and turned toward our unwelcome guest. A little girl with blonde pigtails skipped closer to us, concealing something behind her back. A wide grin was plastered across her lips. She couldn't have been older than 5 or 6 years old. My name's Annika. What's yours? Again she received no response. None of you worker people are any fun. You never want to play with me, she huffed, her smile melting into a deep frown. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about replying to her. Maybe Annika was just a lonely spirit who wanted some company. But I quickly snapped myself back to reality. No, we had been warned about her for a reason. You're not even going to talk to me? Annika pouted, tears welling in her deep blue eyes. I weakly shook my head. Nothing in the instructions told me I couldn't at least do that. I instantly knew I had made the right decision. The little girl's eyes flooded with darkness until they were pitch black. She began to cackle, her demented laughter ringing out into the desolate night. She exposed her hands, revealing what she'd been hiding. I choked on a scream. Annika was holding a bloody, dripping hatchet. You chose wisely, she bellowed before turning back in the direction she came. Zach and I watched as she skipped further and further away before seemingly disappearing into thin air. Once the little girl was completely out of sight, we shared a glance. What the hell was that? Zach muttered. That, I replied, pulling out the list of rules, is proof that we aren't being hazed. Now we know this isn't some kind of twisted joke, Zach mulled it over for a moment. I could see the cogs turning in his head. Honestly, I still don't buy it, he concluded, continuing onward. I stared blankly at him, jaw agape. What in the ever-loving crap do you mean you don't buy it? We just saw it with our own eyes. I mean exactly what I said, I don't buy it. It's got to be Jerry or one of the other Watchmen testing us. Maybe one of them has a granddaughter who agreed to help out. I don't know. But it's going to take a lot more than a creepy little girl to convince me that any of this, he spat, snatching the talisman from his neck, isn't just some elaborate hoax. I shook my head, breaking eye contact. What was I supposed to say to that? We had just seen a little girl with a bloody hatchet evaporate into the wind, and Zach still didn't believe it. I was dumbstruck. After weighing my options, I decided to catch up to my companion and continue our patrol in silence. I knew that nothing I could say would convince Zach that what we'd just experienced was real. There was no point in trying. Eventually we reached a gate at the far end of the graveyard. As my light illuminated it, I realized how poorly maintained it was. Its black paint was chipping, leaving multiple spots exposed to rust. But the most interesting part? It was hanging wide open. Zach, do you know if this is supposed to be shut? I asked, searching his expression. He pondered it for a moment. I would think so. Maybe Jerry left out this way and forgot to close it. I slowly nodded my head. That didn't make much sense, seeing as the rear entrance led to a wide open field, but it was better than the alternative. Yeah, that has to be it. Nobody would even need to use this. I'll go close it. I marched up to the gate and grabbed onto the cool metal bars. A small creak emitted from the rusted hinges as I pulled. I had it about halfway shut when I paused. My heart suddenly began to race, and my blood ran cold because standing right outside of the cemetery's boundary was a man. Hi there. I'm just going to close this, I said, continuing what I had started. The mysterious figure turned toward me and stepped into the light, allowing me a better look at his face. He looked relatively young, late 20s or early 30s if I had to guess. His clothes were far outdated. He sported a beige coat and a fedora, which was a strange combination given that it was mid-June. A lit cigarette dangled from his lips, the smoke billowing high into the warm night air. I instantly got a sinking feeling in my gut. This felt wrong. No, don't bother. I'll take care of it, the man said as he sauntered into the confines of the graveyard. To my utter shock, he snapped his fingers, and the gate began to shut on its own. I thought back to rule number 2, this must have been the demon. Hey, who the hell are you? Zach interjected, staring daggers at our untimely visitor. The man took a drag of his cigarette, exhaled slowly, and then flashed Zach the creepiest smile I had ever seen. After our encounter with Annika, that was really saying something. My name is Amadeus. A chill involuntarily rippled down my spine. Amadeus? It sounded strangely familiar, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Well, Amadeus, I need you to get the heck out of here before I call the cops. This is private property, Zack replied, flashing his light directly in the man's eyes. I'm afraid that I won't be leaving anytime soon. In the meantime, I think I'll stick with you, the entity bellowed, marching in Zack's direction. The flashlight beam directly in his eyes did absolutely nothing to halt his progress. Zack's expression dropped, and I watched all the colour drain from his face. My stomach twisted itself into knots. We had been warned. Zack, the talisman, I shouted, motioning toward the ward around my neck. He frantically felt around in his pockets. I looked on with bated breath as Amadeus closed the distance. Zack was getting more panicked by the second. Ha! I got it! He finally yelled triumphantly, holding up the cross necklace. His victory was short-lived. I'm sorry, Amadeus said, placing a hand on Zack's shoulder, but you're too late. My heart pounded like a jackhammer in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Before Zack had a chance to throw the talisman around his neck, Amadeus's form began to dissipate and flow directly into Zack. A black cloud flooded into his mouth, and in an instant it was gone. I swear in that moment I saw Zack's eyes flash red before returning to their normal hue. Zack, I said, unsure of what to do. Nate, what the hell just happened to me? I breathed a sigh of relief. It appeared that whatever that mysterious cloud was, it hadn't affected him too badly. I think we just met the demon, and I think you were just possessed. Well, what are we supposed to do? I can't be possessed. I've got too much to live for. Come on, Nate, I'm freaking out here, Zack said, pacing back and forth. Okay, try to stay calm. Nothing weird has happened to you yet, so let's go back to the guard shack and come up with a game plan. Does that sound good? Yeah, you're right. I don't feel any different. Maybe it was all another elaborate joke, nah. I pursed my lips. I highly doubt that, but after what we've seen tonight, I can't rule it out. The walk back to the guard post was a solemn one. Zack seemed like he was deep in thought, and I couldn't blame him. We had a lot to think about. Once we had returned, I locked the pair of us inside. What are you doing that for? Trying to keep me quarantined? Zack asked, raising an eyebrow. Not just you, but keeping both of us quarantined. Remember rule number 3? Well, it's 2:35, but we spent a lot of time out there. Okay, enough with these stupid rules. We ran into a creepy kid and some oddball smoker, so what? That doesn't mean that they're real. All right, you're free to take that chance. Either way, I'm calling Jerry, I said, producing my phone from my pocket. I turned my back on him and dialed Jerry's number. He didn't pick up. When I whipped back around to update Zack, I nearly leapt out of my skin. He was standing almost nose to nose with me. A wide grin stamped across his face, and the entirety of his eyes were pitch black. Zack, what the hell are you doing? I said, backing up as far as I could. My butt hit the desk, sending a stack of papers fluttering to the ground. Zack isn't here right now, the entity uttered in a deep, angry voice. I could feel myself beginning to quiver. Fine, Amadeus. What do you plan on doing with him? Amadeus began to cackle, completely disregarding my question. At that moment, I started to hear violent knocks on the door and the windows. I could see what appeared to be invisible handprints slapping the glass. I started to hyperventilate. This was all too much. Tears welled in the corners of my eyes as I darted to the other side of the shack. I didn't have a lot of room to work with, but I knew that I needed to put as much space between myself and the demon as humanly possible. Zack's face turned towards me, the low laughter finally dying down. What am I going to do with this arrogant mortal, you ask? Amadeus sat, glaring at me but remaining motionless. I'm going to take his soul to the underworld, of course. He began to cackle once more, his boisterous laughter mingling with the howls and rattling outside my little prison. I crumpled to the ground, curling into a ball and covering my head with my hands. 5 minutes. That's all that I had to wait, right? I didn't know if I could even make it that long before losing my sanity. Just as the noises around me reached a crescendo, everything suddenly fell dead silent. No whistling winds, no hands against glass, and more disturbingly, no cackling demon. I hesitantly lifted my head, fully expecting to find Zack looming over me, holding some sort of makeshift weapon. But he wasn't. Instead, I saw him go limp, his body toppling onto the desk behind him. I hurriedly rushed to his side, praying that he was okay. "Zach! Zach!" I shouted, shaking his shoulder. A muffled groan escaped his lips. I exhaled sharply. It felt as if a weight had been lifted. Zach picked himself up off the desk, groggy, locking eyes with me. "What just happened?" I crossed my arms. "You got possessed and started laughing, and then you passed out. You remember any of that?" "Not a thing." "Well, at least now you have your proof that this isn't a hoax." Zach opened his mouth to speak, but the buzzing of my cell phone cut him off. It was Jerry. I put a finger to my lips and accepted the call. "What do you want, kid? This better be good. Old men need their rest, you know." Yeah. I don't know if good is the word I would use." I could hear Jerry sigh over the line. "Let me guess. One of you knuckleheads broke rule number 2 and forgot your talisman. If you hadn't, you wouldn't be calling me. And if you'd broken the other ones, you wouldn't be able to call me. Do I have that right?" I shamefully stared at the ground. "Yes, we ran into the demon named Amodius, and Zach wasn't wearing his necklace." I could practically see Jerry shaking his head. "All right, I'll be up there soon. Don't let Zachary leave until we can assess the damage. Are either of you hurt?" "Not physically, no." "Okay." That was Jerry's last departing word before hanging up. I didn't blame him for being so short with me. He probably saw us as children. Left alone for a few short hours and we had already managed to mess up. "What did he say?" Zach asked sheepishly, meeting my gaze. "He said he's on the way and that he's going to kick your ass for waking him up when he gets here. That guy's got a lot of nerve. My body gets commandeered by a freaking demon of all things, and Jerry's worried about his beauty sleep? God." I looked Zach directly in the eyes and took an aggressive step toward him. "Jerry wouldn't have to worry about you being possessed or losing a wink of sleep if somebody had just worn this stupid necklace. Honestly, I wouldn't mind kicking your ass either." Zach scowled at me before averting his gaze and mumbling under his breath. I didn't care, he needed to be put in his place. Around 20 minutes later we heard a pounding on the door. "Hello? One of you nimwits want to let me in?" I shot Zach a look. "The cavalry has arrived." I walked to the door, unlocked the chain lock and let Jerry inside. He greeted me with a glare before marching directly up to my pea-brained co-worker. The old man glowered menacingly, his eyes searching Zach's expression. Sorry," Zach offered, taking a step back. "You better be. I was fast asleep until you two morons called me up here. Now what's this about a demon?" I sighed, recounting the story to Jerry without omitting any of the minor details. He listened intently, staring daggers at Zach all the while. "All right, it's not that bad," Jerry said, pursing his lips. "Not that bad. A freaking demonic entity took over my body and wants to eat my soul." "What do you mean, it's not that bad?" Zach retorted, frowning at Jerry. "I'm getting to that, sheesh." "As I was saying," Jerry hissed, glaring at Zach, "Amodius is the illegitimate son of Asmodeus, one of the 7 princes of hell, also known as the King of Demons. Amodius was the product of a scandalous affair with a mortal woman. Asmodeus was so appalled by the weakness of his son that he banished him from hell for all eternity. Since that day, Amodius has been trying to harvest souls and send them to the underworld in an attempt to restore himself in the eyes of his father." "So, what you're saying is Zach got possessed by a half-demon," I interjected. "Yes, Amodius is so weak that he can barely control his host's bodily functions. From what I've observed over the years, he can really only speak and take a couple of baby steps if he's lucky. It's a miracle that you didn't encounter the demon Ascendad. If you had met her, you would have been doomed." Wait. There's a second demon?" Zach shouted, his mouth agape. "Yes, there is. Stick around long enough, and you will meet Alicia eventually. She was confined here by a spell nearly 200 years ago. She's a direct descendant of Lilith. A real feisty one, she is." "Okay, that's terrifying and all, but what about my situation? How do we get rid of Amodius? I don't know about you two, but I would rather not have a loser half-demon taking residence inside my body." Jerry sighed. "Well, that's where things get tricky. This won't be a quick fix. I'll need to contact a Catholic priest who has been ordained as an exorcist. It may be a while before you're demon-free." Zach's frown deepened. That clearly wasn't the answer he was hoping for. "So what? I'm just stuck with this thing. What happens if Amodius takes over while I'm driving? He could end me at a moment's notice." Jerry pondered for a moment. "Then you should be fine. Contrary to popular belief, he needs you alive. Demons can only claim your soul if you A. make a deal with them, B. perform a certain ritual, or C. give them permission to take it. Unless you're an idiot, I assume options A and C are out of the question, and Ammonius isn't nearly strong enough to make you walk anywhere, let alone perform an entire sacrificial ceremony. I don't know, Jerry. Our option C is off the table. If you haven't noticed, Zachary here isn't the brightest crayon in the box, I said, smirking. I was rewarded with a scowl. Jerry pursed his lips before standing to his feet. He placed a wrinkled hand on Zach's shoulder. Son, if you're really as stupid as your co-worker seems to think you are, then you're doomed. Otherwise, just don't do anything too idiotic until I can pull some strings, okay? Whatever. Thanks for nothing, old man, Zach whispered with a snarl. Screw you two then. Have a fun rest of your shift. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some sleep to catch up on. Jerry stormed out, slamming the door shut behind him. Well, that could have gone better, I said, folding my arms across my chest. Zach reluctantly met my gaze. Yeah, you're telling me? The remainder of the night went by without a hitch. We'd already encountered all the weird stuff, so we were able to coast until dawn. I wish I could say that clocking out was like a breath of fresh air, that all my worries had faded away, but unsurprisingly they hadn't. I slept restlessly, knowing what kind of atrocities my next shift would have in store. I yawned as I trudged up to the guard shack. I produced my keychain from my pocket and fiddled with it until I found the correct key. Right when I was about to insert it into the lock, the door was fiercely yanked open. Oh, hey, Zach. I didn't expect you to be here so early. Zach's eyes were wide and bloodshot, his hands jittery, and his hair was unkempt. If I hadn't known any better, I would have thought a meth head had infiltrated my post. Yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I came in early. I just drank 2 entire pots of coffee. Never had coffee before. Do you know what that stuff does to you? Huh? Caffeine. It's like a drug, you know. I feel like I could do anything, like I could fly if I wanted to. Great. So my dumbass co-worker was damn near overdosing on caffeine. Awesome. Just how I wanted to start my shift. I pushed past Zach, punched in, and then turned back and flicked him on the forehead. Ow! What was that for? You shouldn't have done that, Nate. No, you're not going to do anything. You're going to sit in this chair and stay still until I tell you to move. You're high as a kite on caffeine, and lest we not forget, you're also possessed by a demon. Now sit down and shut up. Zach glared at me, puffing out his lower lip. You're not my dad. Yeah, I know. That man deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping you out of trouble for so long. Anyway, let's take a look at the list for today. Zach passed me a sheet of paper with the word Tuesday imprinted on the top in bold letters. Well, what's it say? Zach asked, literally 2 seconds after handing me the page. I thumped him on the forehead again. Patience is a virtue. Start working on it. Zach mumbled something under his breath before gazing up at me thoughtlessly, his left leg bouncing up and down like a jackrabbit. I sighed, praying that the rules wouldn't be too awful. Unfortunately, my prayers fell on deaf ears. I began to read aloud. Rule number 1. Early in your rounds, a skinless woman will appear to you. Flash your light at her and shout, I command thee, return to the shadows from whence you came. She will follow you for the remainder of the night from afar, but she will not harm you. Rule number 2. At 10 minutes past midnight, take the vial of goat blood from the drawer and spread it across your forehead. It will ward off the banshee. Rule number 3. A curse has been placed on all 5 members of the O'Connor family. They will rise from their graves and wander around the premises. They will not attack you unless provoked. Keep your distance just to be safe. Zach and I locked eyes, our jaws hanging open. What the heck? I muttered, scanning over the list again to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. Nate, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I need a career change. This is too much. I thought about it for a minute. The pay was incredible, yes, but did I really need this job? Would I be able to live comfortably without it? A big fat no flashed in my head like a siren. I normally would have thrown in the towel, but I had some hefty expenses and I couldn't afford to quit. I don't want to do this either, but I also don't have a choice. And if I were you, I'd be inclined to stick it out as well. After all, I doubt Jerry would be willing to help you out of your little predicament if you quit on your second day. Zach sighed. Yeah, you have a point. All right, let's get this over with. We each armed ourselves with a flashlight and headed out. I tucked that night's list in my pocket, just in case. The walk down the rows of headstones was tense. Each tiny movement was enough to make me jump. My heart exploded in my chest with every rustling leaf and whistle of the wind. The knowledge of what we were about to see put me on edge, and Zach wasn't faring any better. Due to the copious amounts of caffeine that he'd consumed, he was even more jumpy than I was. "Hey, Zach," I said, keeping my eyes glued to my surroundings. He cautiously turned to face me. What if she doesn't show up? Does that count as breaking the rule? I froze when I saw the look of unabated terror etched across Zach's features. He was as pale as a ghost, and his hands were trembling. The beam of his flashlight was trained on something behind me. Dread bubbled in my stomach. I didn't want to look. I didn't know if I could look, but I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to escape with my life, I needed to follow the rules. I whipped around, ripping off the band-aid. I cannot even begin to do justice to the abomination that stood before me. A red, pulsating mass leered back at me, slimy exposed veins thrumming in unison. That thing, it had no eyes, just empty pitch-black holes where eyes should have been. The way it was standing there felt wrong. Its head was cocked to the side like a curious dog, taking us in, studying us. I hyperventilated as I shone my flashlight into the monstrosity's face. It stumbled backward, raising its fleshy arms to shield itself from the light. I hurriedly ripped out the rules and read from the page. "I command thee, return to the shadows from whence you came," I said in the loudest, most confident voice I could muster. The writhing mass of muscle and sinew tipped its head downward at me in what I assumed was a glare, then reluctantly slunk into the darkness, growing further and further away with each step. I watched it retreat until it stopped at the perimeter of the grounds. My heartbeat still hadn't completely settled, but I released a breath and turned to Zach. All the blood suddenly drained from my face when I did. Zach was gone. "Zach, this isn't funny. You can come out now," I said cautiously, proceeding to the spot where I'd last seen him. I shone my flashlight down adjacent rows of gravestones. It was deathly quiet. The only sound I could hear was my own ragged breathing. "Marco," I called out in an attempt to calm my nerves. "Polo," a deep menacing voice from directly beside me answered. I gulped. I recognized that twisted inflection. "Amodius?" I squeaked, peeking behind the nearest headstone. "Ding, ding, ding, we have a winner!" Zach shot up from his hiding spot, now standing inches from my face. His eyes were again completely shrouded in black. "Come on, Amodius, we don't have time for this. Zach isn't giving you his soul any time soon, so you might as well give it up." "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. You see, Zachary seems to be a very lonely man, and who better to befriend than the O'Connors? They really are nice people once you become acquainted with them." A disturbing grin inched across Zach's lips as he pointed to a silhouette lumbering along. My heart dropped into my stomach. He couldn't be serious. To my immense dismay, Zach lurched in the figure's direction, taking a huge, awkward step forward. I knew that I had to intervene. I leapt in front of him, halting the demon in his tracks. "Stop! I won't let you attack that thing," Amodius snarled at me. "Get out of my way!" With one fell swoop, he smacked me square in the chest, sending me sprawling to the ground. "Harmless, huh? Can barely take a few baby steps, huh?" "Yeah, thanks for the warning, Jerry," I cursed, rising to my feet. The distance between Zach and the zombie-like figure was closing. I slowly shook my head. Zach wasn't going to like it, but I knew what I had to do. I marched up to Amodius, who, to Jerry's credit, was struggling to put one foot in front of the other. "Didn't I tell you to smack?" I punched him in the face as hard as I could. Zach's body crumbled in a heap on the ground. I grimaced as pain jolted through my knuckles like a lightning bolt. Mission accomplished. He was down for the count, and not a second too soon either, because when I turned around I was met with a downright horrifying sight. What had once been a man stared at me with one glassy, pale blue eye. The other dangled uselessly from its socket, hanging on by a thread. Decaying flesh sloughed off his face, leaving areas of exposed sinew and tendons. Maggots writhed beneath his loose skin, intermittently falling to the ground. I was rooted to the spot. My breath hitched in my throat as I awaited the corpse's next move. After a tense moment of silence, the cadaver released a low moan before turning and ambling in the other direction. I gasped for air, placing a hand over my heart. That was a close one. I was going to have to keep my guard up. As the fear began to dissipate, I crossed my arms and glanced down at my unconscious co-worker. What am I going to do with you, huh? Can't go 2 minutes without getting yourself into trouble. Zach released a small fart in response. Yeah, I feel the same way, I said, cracking a smile. Just to be sure that I wasn't forgetting anything, I pulled out the list of rules that I'd tucked into my pocket. I frowned as I scanned over them again. I'd forgotten about Rule 2. I hurriedly checked the time. We had 7 minutes. I vainly tried to pull Zach along, but years of Netflix marathons and gaming sessions hadn't exactly worked to bolster my strength. I began to panic. The guard shack wasn't too far away, but I definitely wasn't going to be able to get Zach there. That left me with one option. I dropped Zach's arm to the ground and bolted. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. The entire time, I had the creeping sensation of being watched. I shone my flashlight at the perimeter of the graveyard and nearly leapt out of my skin. That thing, it was still there. It had been tagging along behind me the entire time, sticking to the shadows. I can't be certain, but I could have sworn that when my flashlight beam landed on its face, I saw it grinning at me. That only motivated me to run faster. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. There it was. The guard shack was in sight. Once I finally closed the distance, I flung myself through the door and began rummaging through the drawers for the vial. I was such an idiot. I should have taken it with us from the get-go. I tossed aside various trinkets and papers until I found it. A glass bottle filled with dark crimson liquid. I poured a splash of the goat's blood into my hand and unceremoniously swiped it across my forehead. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 3 minutes. With our saving grace in hand, I sprinted back to the spot where I'd abandoned my co-worker. Even if he was knocked out cold, I didn't want to know the implications of failing to ward off a banshee. I ran like my life depended on it. For all I knew, mine may not have been at risk, but Zach's definitely was. He might have been a pain, but he didn't deserve to die an excruciating death at the hands of some eldritch deity. By the time my incapacitated co-worker came into view, my legs were burning and my lungs screamed at me to stop. Fortunately, my adrenaline fueled me to continue onward, but finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zach's immobile form came into view. My heart dropped into my toes. Someone was approaching him, and it wasn't any of the O'Connors. When I was about 50 feet away, I was able to clearly drink in her features. My worst fear was instantly confirmed. A woman with white, flowing hair was walking towards Zach's motionless body. She wore a white nightgown to match, and she had no shoes. At that distance, I couldn't tell if she was young or old, but I did begin to pick up on something that I hadn't noticed before. Crying. The woman sobbed openly, tears flowing down her face. The sound of her lamenting cries made my blood turn to ice. She was going to beat me to Zach. I prayed to any god who would listen to help me, to help Zach, to get both of us out of our shitty situation. And something must have listened, because at that moment, Zach sat up. What? Wait. Who are you? He said groggily, staring up at the woman shuffling over to him. She was so close. I had to think fast. Hey, Zach, over here, I shouted. He spun to face me. Close your eyes. The moment Zach's eyelids shut, I reared my arm back and chucked the vial directly at his head. Each second felt like a lifetime as the bottle whirled through the air. I was eventually met with the sound of shattering glass. I pumped my fist. The vial exploded on Zach's head, the dark viscous liquid dripping down his face, and not a moment too soon. The woman had stopped crying, her mouth open, prepared to unleash an ungodly shriek, one that never came. Upon seeing Zach's bloody forehead, the woman closed her mouth, turned, and walked away as if nothing had happened. Oh, thank goodness. Zach, you're one lucky son of a gun, you know that? I said, trotting up to him. Oh yeah? Well, I don't feel like one. That hurt, man. How would you like to have a glass bottle smashed over your head? He retorted, picking crimson shards from his hair. If it saved my life, I don't think I would have too much to complain about. Let's get you cleaned up, I said, extending a hand. Now that's an idea I can get behind. Soon enough, I found myself back at the guard shack, plucking tiny glass fragments from Zach's head. Not how I pictured my night going, but hey, we were both alive, and that was all that really mattered. Hey Nate, Zach said, shattering the silence. What's up, man? Can I ask you something? I pursed my lips. That's not a question anybody wants to hear. Well, it depends. What do you got for me? Okay, so I know the pay is phenomenal, but with all the stuff we've been through, why haven't you quit yet? I know it hasn't even been 2 days, but anybody else would have been running for the hills by this point. So why haven't you... I sighed. The pay. That's all there is to it. Oh, come on, man, that can't be it. It's not worth the risk. There has to be something deeper. I paused, taking a deep breath. I knew this would probably come up eventually, but I was really hoping it wouldn't. All right, fine, but it's some heavy stuff. You have to promise me that what I tell you stays between us, okay? I said, setting down the tweezers and maintaining fierce eye contact with him. I promise. All right, don't say that I didn't warn you. He nodded, indicating for me to begin. I glanced down, summoning the strength to do so. I exhaled sharply and spoke. When I was 22, I was an alcoholic. I would start drinking at 7 on the dot every evening and go until 1 or 2 in the morning, nasty hangovers every time that I would wake up. You see, after I graduated college, I couldn't find a decent job. While all my classmates got to kick off their brand new careers, I was stuck. I didn't get it. I wasn't bad in interviews by any means on the rare opportunities that I would land one, but still, nobody was willing to give me a chance. And so, I drank to take away the sting of rejection, of complacency, of feeling like I was never going to amount to anything. And that's where I messed up. I couldn't see it then, but I had the world at my fingertips. I had so much to live for, and I threw it all away. I paused, glancing down at my feet. Nate, I'm sorry. Look, you don't have to continue if you're not comfortable with it. I can tell that you've been through a lot. No, I said, meeting his gaze. I've started this and I need to finish it, Zach nodded, staring at the ground. Okay, whenever you're ready. So as you can imagine, I wasn't in the best headspace. Well, one night when I was absolutely plastered, I was really craving a pizza, and that led to the worst decision of my life. Instead of placing a delivery order, I drove to Pizza Hut. It was only 5 minutes down the road. Surely nothing awful would happen on that short of a drive, right? Wrong. I never should have started that car. I was so drunk that I could barely put my key in the ignition. That should have been my indicator to stop, but I didn't. The last thing that I remember is pulling out onto the main road. After that, my memory is blank. All I know is that the next day I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. Zach, I killed someone that night. Zach stared at me, his mouth agape. I could tell that he was trying to find the right words to say, but I didn't want to hear them. I wasn't worthy of anybody's sympathy, not after what I had done. It turns out the man I killed had a family, a wife, and a 3-year-old daughter. They were present at the trial, and I couldn't bring myself to look that woman in the eye. She was crying the entire time, and that's when the true weight of my actions really sank in. I'd taken everything from her. That little girl has to grow up without a father because of me, because of what I did. I steadied myself, wiping the tears from my cheeks before I continued. The judge gave me 4 years. The family pushed for reckless homicide, but I got off easy. I only served 3 before they let me out on good behaviour. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't touched a drop of alcohol. This is the only job I can get that will pay this well. I know that I don't deserve it. I don't deserve money and I don't deserve happiness. I took somebody's life away. I should be rotting in a cell somewhere. But even so, I'm still trying to make it up to that family, to that little girl. I know that nothing will correct my mistakes, but that won't stop me from trying. I had a contact from inside Trackdown where they live, and every month I drop off any money that I save in a blank envelope. That's why I haven't quit. I need this job. Not for me, but for them. It's only right after what I've done. When I finished, Zach didn't lift his head, his elbows resting on his knees. For a minute I thought that he might have zoned out, but after a tense moment of silence, he reluctantly looked me in the eye. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You did a messed up thing, but does that really mean you have to punish yourself for the rest of your life? That one selfish action will cause that man's family to suffer until the day they die. Because of that, the answer is yes. There's no changing my mind on this, I said, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. I deserve to work this twisted job and deal with whatever demented things this place has to throw at me. I won't be quitting anytime soon. Zach didn't respond. He simply averted his gaze, his eyes returning to the ground once again. Before I knew it, Tuesday had come and gone without any more notable encounters. At sunrise, all of the creepy, demonic entities returned to wherever they had come from, but they weren't the ones that I was worried about. With the weight of our previous exchange, I half expected Zach to skip out on me when it came time to return to work, but to my surprise, he didn't. "What's up, Nate?" Zach asked, taking a sip from a Red Bull. I mentally facepalmed myself. Great. More caffeine, just what the doctor ordered. Hey, Zach, I'm kind of scared to ask, but how many of those have you had tonight? He scoffed. No need to worry, this is the only one that I've got. I'm not making the same mistake as last night. I would hope not, I said as I clocked in. I was mid-stride, ready to find out what kind of horrors we were going to face that night, when I felt a buzz in my pocket. My phone was ringing, and Jerry's name was on the screen. Hey, Jerry, what you got for me? I asked, turning it on speaker mode so Zach could hear her. I've got some good news. A buddy of mine was able to contact an exorcist in the area, and he's got an opening on Friday night. We just have to make it through this week. Oh, thank God, Zach exclaimed, loud enough for Jerry to hear. Amodius has been a real pain in the butt. That rat took a picture of me crying like a baby and sent it to everybody in my contacts. I know. I was wondering why you sent a photo of yourself bawling your eyes out and sucking your thumb. Thought it was some weird thing that you were into. Zach's face had turned beet red. He looked like he could keel over at any moment out of sheer embarrassment. Anyway, just survive until Friday and this whole mess should be cleared up. That's incredible. Thank you so much, Jerry. Oh, and one more thing before you go. What is it, kid? Make it quick. I gotta catch up on my beauty sleep. Remember when you said that Amodius wouldn't put Zach's life in danger? Was that actually true? Because I'm pretty sure he tried to last night. Now, I'm sure Amodius might try to freak him out to entice him into making a deal, but he needs Zach alive. Without a living host, he's nothing more than a powerless watcher. I pondered his words. Maybe Jerry was right. Amodius did seem like the type of scummy half-demon to do that. All right, if that's all, I gotta go. Good luck. I didn't even have a chance to reply before the line went dead. Well, that's promising, I said, redirecting my attention to Zach. And by the way, I saved that photo before you sent the message. I'm not letting you live that down for as long as we're working together. Zach's lips instantly morphed into a frown. It warmed my heart just a little. Oh, whatever, man. Just read the rules already. I obliged, scooping up Wednesday's list. Rule number 1, take the holy water from the desk. At some point in the evening, a Reverend Clayman will try to convert you to Satanism by having you participate in a sacrificial offering. Splash holy water in his face, and he'll leave you alone. Rule number 2, at exactly 10:32 p.m., a bloody, dishevelled man will give you a choice. Help him or leave him to die. No matter how much he begs, you must choose to let him die. Rule number 3, complete 2 rounds of patrols tonight. On your second round, you will hear a howling in the distance. Immediately run to the guard shack and lock yourselves inside until morning. You do not want to meet the creature that the howl belongs to. Well, that doesn't seem too bad, I said, stuffing the list into my pocket. Really? That doesn't sound bad to you? Because to me it sounds like we're going to be werewolf food if we're not star athletes. I don't know what your definition of bad is, but it's a lot different from mine. Yeah, probably so. But assuming these rules are the same every week, Jerry's been doing this for God knows how long, and he's a dinosaur. Are you really going to let a geriatric old man outdo you? Zach sighed, standing from his chair. All right, you have a point. Maybe it's not too horrible. I guess we can go ahead and get the first patrol out of the way. No sense in waiting around. I nodded, pocketing the vial of holy water and motioning toward the door. Ladies first. Ha ha, real funny, you're a natural comedian. Thanks, I've been working on my stand-up, I said, brushing past him. A tense blanket of silence permeated the air as we walked. It was more than just nerves at that point. Zach and I had been through some traumatic experiences, and even though it had only been 2 days, I'd been around him long enough to know when something was up. Hey man, about last night. I'm sorry for dropping all that on you. I should have kept it to myself, but I felt like you deserved to know, I said, studying his expression. Zach sighed, locking eyes with me. You did the right thing by telling me. I still don't completely know what to think about it, but I'd rather have that out of the way. I could see that it was eating at you. No hard feelings. I just need some time to process it. I nodded, shifting my gaze to the row of gravestones before us. That's completely understandable. What the hell is that thing? Zach and I stopped in our tracks. The beam from my flashlight had illuminated something red. My immediate instinct was to rush over to it, but thankfully my sense of logic kicked in at the right moment. Is that a body? Nate, what if somebody's hurt? We have to help them, Zach said, taking a step closer. I grabbed his arm, preventing him from going any further. Zach, I think that's the man from rule number 2. What time is it? He checked his phone, the screen lighting up his pale, wide-eyed expression. It's 10:32. Okay, I said, thinking out loud. Maybe we can just walk straight past him. Simple enough, right? Yeah, I don't think we really have a choice, do we? Good point. Just as we were starting to approach, the blood-soaked mass started to shift. Limbs began to writhe and crack, and the wet snapping of bones assaulted my ears. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I had to know. I cautiously shuffled up to the thing, the flashlight shaking in my grasp. I was right. It was a man, but his features were all wrong. His arms and legs were mangled like he had fallen from a high-rise. His lower half was contorted so that it was flat on the ground, while his torso faced the sky. But the worst part was his face. The man's teeth were all shattered, broken yellow fragments clinging to his bloody gums. His mouth was open, as if in a permanent agonized scream. His grey eyes appeared blank, staring listlessly up at the smattering of stars shining down on us, until they rapidly shifted to me. "Help me," the man croaked, barely able to choke the words out. Tears welled in my eyes. Memories that I didn't know I had suddenly came racing back to me in flashes. The night of the accident, 2 cars smashed beyond repair, EMTs and first responders pulling me out of my vehicle, a mutilated, disfigured man being placed on a gurney, 2 glassy eyes that would never regain their sight. It was all too much to bear. "Zach, we have to help him. Please," I shouted, begging him to agree. "Nate, what's going on with you? The rules said we couldn't. I got possessed the last time we didn't follow them, remember?" I dropped to my knees, tears clouding my vision. They had the same face, the man from that night and the one lying before me. They had the same exact face. "Zach, it's him from the crash. Please, we have to do something." Zach grabbed my head and forcefully shifted my gaze away from the man. "Look, I don't know who you're seeing right now, but it's not him. This man, thing, whatever it is playing tricks on you. It's not the same person, Nate. You have to believe me." My heart was torn into shreds. Between the unexpected rush of memories, the flood of emotions, and the adrenaline coursing through my veins, I was a total wreck. I wasn't thinking straight, but hindsight is 20. "Help me, please," I broke down. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I cried and cried as Zach stood over me, and the man continued to bleed out. I was useless. I pulled out my phone and began to dial 911. I could save him. What if this was my chance at redemption? Just one call, that's all I needed. Just as I was punching in the numbers, the phone was swiped from my hand. "I'm sorry," Zach said, frowning at the butchered man lying before us, "but we can't help you." Almost immediately after the words left his lips, the tangled mess of limbs and body parts began to pop and snap back into place. Before I could even begin to comprehend what I was seeing, the man stood from the ground, a wide, gummy grin etched across his features. He made eye contact with me, his pitch-black, soulless pupils boring into me. In a low, menacing tone, he whispered, "You made the right choice." I blinked, struggling to understand what was happening, but in the nanosecond that my eyelids flicked shut, the man had vanished. I couldn't believe it. He was there 1 second, and then the next, it was as if he had never been there at all. I took long, deep breaths, desperately trying to steady my palpitating heart. Zach placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Hey, it's over now. Everything's going to be okay." I closed my eyes, taking a moment to myself before standing to face him. "Hey, you're right. I'm sorry that you had to see me like that. It really is quite all right, my son. You should feel no obligation to apologize." Zach and I both whipped around, trying to locate the source of the voice. We were met with the outline of a figure. He stepped into the light, allowing us a better look. He was a man clad in black robes, a pentagram necklace hung from his neck, prominently displayed against his clothing. His eyes glowed red, and a disturbingly wide smile displayed rows of yellow, decaying teeth. But the strangest part, 2 twin horns jutted from the mess of tangled brown hair atop his head. Not to be rude, but who the hell are you?" Zach asked, visibly confused. Our unwelcome visitor scoffed, taking a step closer. "Who am I? You may refer to me as Reverend Clayman. Just Clayman, if you insist on—" I didn't wait for him to finish. I retrieved the vial from my pocket, discarded the seal, and splashed the entire bottle into his face. I'd had enough of the weird for one night. "What the— was that holy water? You impotent buffoon! Do you realize what you've done?" No, not really. Am I supposed to?" I retorted, crossing my arms. You've cost me a fortune in dry cleaning. Do you know how long it takes to eradicate the effects of holy water from an article of clothing? Days! And it takes even longer to wash it off your skin. Watch your backs, both of you. You've just made a powerful enemy. Yeah, whatever. Get to scrubbing, I said to Reverend Clayman as he slunk away. Wow, that was pretty cold, even for you. I kind of wanted to mess with him a little bit, act like we'd be interested in what he was selling, Zack said, watching the dejected entity kick the dirt. Yeah, well, I wasn't in the mood. That's 2 eldritch beings marked off the list, 1 to go. Zack gulped, nodding as he stared into the grass. Yeah, just 1. We came to the joint decision to go ahead and get our 2 walkthroughs over with for the night while tensions were high. No need to settle down and then go back out just to get worked up again, right? By the time we'd completed the first round, I was a bundle of nerves. I was on high alert, ready to take off into a dead sprint at a moment's notice. I didn't know what kind of howl we would have been expecting, but soon I was going to find out. Nate, what if we're too early? What if we don't hear it? Zack asked. He appeared calm, but I could tell that he was just as freaked out as I was. He had a valid concern. We were already 2/3 of the way through our second patrol, and the only audible sounds had been crickets in the distance and the soft padding of our footsteps against the grass. That's not going to happen. These rules don't leave anything up to chance. It's like we're on the set of a horror movie, like there's an invisible puppet master controlling all the weird stuff that's been going on. I guess I never really thought about it like that, but now that you mention it, I think you might be right. Everything syncs up a little too well. Yeah, exactly. So keep your guard up. We're bound to encounter it soon enough. As if on cue, we heard it. The most menacing animalistic noise that I had ever had the displeasure of experiencing rang out from the hills on the outskirts of the cemetery. It sounded like a wolf if wolves knew how to scream. Zack and I glanced at each other, our faces pale as ghosts. That sounded close, Zack muttered. Well, that's because it was. Run. We snapped out of our collective stupor and bolted in the direction of the guard shack. Zack was slimmer and more fit than I was, so after about 30 seconds, he had a decent lead on me. That is until the unthinkable happened. The guard shack was in view, our safety beacon just a few yards away, and then Zack tripped. Time seemed to move in slow motion after that. 1 second I was securely behind him, and the next I was passing by my fallen co-worker, shouting at him to get up. But by the look on his face, I didn't think Zack would heed my warnings. He was frozen in fear. I skidded to a halt. I thought maybe I could help him up, that maybe we could both make it out of there without incident. Oh, how wrong I was. Zack, what the hell are you doing? We have to... I paused. He was staring at something. I traced his gaze and nearly passed out from pure, unabated terror. A beast, with brown fur and yellow glowing eyes, was locked in a sickening staring match with Zack. Shredded clothing clung loosely to its matted coat, and its teeth were bared, foam dribbling from the sides of its mouth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then out of nowhere, my worst fears were confirmed. The monstrosity started slowly making its way towards Zack. I could practically feel the fear radiating off of him as the behemoth advanced. My heart hammered wildly in my chest as it stood on its hind legs, looming over Zack's motionless form. It raised a clawed paw into the air, primed to strike, but it never did. Stop, a low menacing voice emanated from deep within Zack's throat, and at that moment I couldn't have been happier to hear it. Return to your lair. This human soul is mine and mine alone. To my utter shock, the beast released a disgruntled snarl and then did as it was told. I watched as it slunk away. I only made my way over to my saviour when it was completely out of sight. Modius, is that you? I timidly asked, approaching Zack's rigid body. Bingo! I couldn't let any harm befall my wonderful meat puppet now, could I? Hey, when you put it like that, I'm a lot less grateful that you showed up. Anyway, how did you do that? What, hypnosis? It's far easier than you mortals would think, and if you're done interrogating me now, I'll be taking my leave for the time being. You owe me. I rolled my eyes. Whatever. If it was up to Modius, he would find a reason for everybody to owe him, and the price tag would be our souls. Sorry, buddy. Not happening. Zack's body went limp, collapsing to the ground. After another moment, he sat up, rubbing his head. What happened? You know that shitty demon you're always complaining about? Well, he just saved your life. Ah, good. That was the least he could do after making me a national laughingstock, Zack muttered. as I helped him to his feet. Yeah, no kidding. Now let's get to the guard shack before that thing comes back for round 2. Once we had arrived, things took a turn for the boring. 3 hours to kill and absolutely nothing to do. Maybe that's what made me ask him. Maybe it's the reason that the question had been gnawing at me to begin with. I'll probably never know. Hey, Zach. Yeah, what's up? He replied, eyes glued to his phone. Can I ask you a personal question? He sighed. No, the picture of me sobbing was not a cry for help. I know that's what you were thinking. I couldn't help but chuckle. Actually, that's not it. When we came across the disfigured man, I saw the guy from the crash. Who did you see? Zach instantly looked up from his phone, returning a steely gaze. He opened his mouth to speak, but thought better of it before returning to his device. I'll tell you another time. You're right. That is a personal question. The remainder of the night dragged by. Now that I'd made things awkward, time seemed to be moving twice as slow, so you can imagine I was ready to leave the instant my shift was over. Clocking out was a moment of pure bliss, but my high soon came spiralling down because I realised that I was going to have to do it all over again the next day. I didn't know what to expect when I showed up for the Thursday shift. Was Zach going to be back to his normal self? Was he going to be tripping balls on coffee again? Was he going to be there at all? I was afraid to know the answer. I tentatively pushed open the door to the guard shack. I could feel sweat beading on my brow. Zach? You in here, buddy? But I was met with silence. I glanced around to find an empty room. I breathed a sigh of relief as I punched in, and then the door swung open. Nate. The way he framed that greeting sent a chill rippling down my spine. There was no emotion in his tone. It was as if he had been replaced by an android. Zach brushed past me, avoiding eye contact as he clocked in. Subdued. Is everything all right? He looked tired. Yeah, I'm fine. What do we have for tonight? He replied in that same monotone voice. I gulped, making my way over to the desk. I'll go ahead and read the rules. Sound good? He nodded, his blank, cold stare boring into my skull. Okay, here we go, I said, picking up Thursday's list. Rule number 1, once you start your rounds, you'll feel a dark presence behind you. Proceed to the back gate, open it, and then step to the side and close your eyes. Once the gate shuts, you're safe. Do not look back no matter what. Rule number 2, there is a statue of the angel Gabriel near the entrance to the cemetery. Place a white lily atop the plaque before it. Complete this task before midnight, or there will be severe consequences. Rule number 3, you may go home at 2:30 a.m, vacate the premises no later than 2:47 a.m. You will be compensated for the full 8 hours. Okay, that's pretty awesome. We get to leave early, and we still get paid for it. It doesn't get much better than that, am I right? Yeah, let's get going, Zach said robotically, marching to the door. Geez, buzzkill much, I breathed, tailing behind him. I had barely stepped foot onto the path when I sensed it. I could feel someone behind me, like there were eyes boring into the back of my head. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't allow myself to look. Do you feel that? I whispered. It felt wrong to speak at a normal level, like that would somehow set the thing off. Yep, Zach replied, without sparing me so much as a glance. I sighed and kept walking, opting to keep my mouth shut. Had I done something wrong, Zach's behaviour was really starting to concern me after one of the most excruciating strolls of my entire life. We finally reached the back gate. Zach marched up to it, kicked it open, and then stepped aside. I followed suit, veering off the path. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for that nightmare feeling to pass. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, 20... After an entire minute, I was beginning to wonder if something was wrong. Had we screwed up somehow? My heart dropped into my stomach. What were we supposed to do? I was strongly considering giving up. We couldn't stand there forever, and it didn't feel like the thing was leaving. Just as I was about to steal a peek, I heard it. The loud creaking of the rusted gate hinges. I released the breath that had hitched in my throat. That was a close one. Good job with that one, buddy, I said, patting Zach on the back. Thanks, he began to wander off. But I shot out a hand to stop him. I was met with a spiteful glare. Look, man, I know that something's up. If you don't want to talk to me, that's fine, but you're really starting to freak me out. I'm worried about you. He flung my hand away, returning his gaze to the path. There's nothing to worry about. I'm okay. It's not anything you did. I just want to be left alone. All right. If you decide that you do want to talk about it, just know that I'm here for you. I'm happy to lend an ear if something's weighing on your mind. Thanks. We continued walking toward the guard shack to complete our final task for the night. A thick tension hung in the air like a cloud. I thought that it would remain there for the rest of the shift, but to my shock, after a few minutes, Zach broke the silence. I saw my brother. I stopped in my tracks and furrowed my brow. That didn't make any sense. What do you mean? Yesterday you asked who I saw, who the man's face was. I saw my brother. Geez, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. It's okay, just, it's going to stick with me. But that's how I knew that what we were seeing wasn't real. When I was 14, my older brother Jacob had passed away. He was 17 years old. He was always a bit of a delinquent, bumming cigarettes off of strangers, stealing booze from the liquor cabinet, you name it. The two of us always had a strange relationship. Compared to him, I was the golden child, and that's exactly how he saw it. Jacob thought that my parents and I were against him, that we saw him as a waste. It wasn't even close to being true, but it caused a lot of fights. All that aside, I really looked up to Jacob. He was so much cooler than I had ever hoped to be. He got girls. I mean, he was popular, and I envied him for that. Looking back now, I wish I would have told him how I felt. Zach trailed off as a tear trickled down his cheek. He wiped it away and took a deep breath before continuing. I was devastated when I got the news. Jacob and a couple of his friends had tried heroin. His friends ended up being okay, they got to live, they got to go home to their families. Jacob didn't. He overdosed that night only 4 days before his 18th birthday. Didn't even get to graduate high school. The only silver lining was that he wasn't in pain when he went. And that's what I always told myself anyway. He wasn't suffering. That's why, when I saw his face and his mangled and disfigured body, it just broke me. It didn't even kick in right away, but just the weight of it. Having my only peace of mind about the situation shattered, it hit me hard. That's why I've been acting strange lately. I can't get that image out of my head. Zach, I'm so sorry, that's awful. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that he had been right all along, that his brother was at peace. But I couldn't think of the right words to say. Every time that I tried, they died on my lips. I felt completely useless. It's okay. I'm the one who should be apologizing. That was a lot to drop on you. No, I'm glad you told me, man. Sometimes you just need to get it off your chest. The trauma really weighs on you if you let it. Zach flashed me a weak grin. Yeah, you're right. Thanks for listening, Nate. I think I needed that. Anytime, buddy. Speaking of which, what time is it? I said, producing my phone from my pocket. My eyes grew wide as saucers when they fell upon the screen. 11:54. I glanced at Zach. His face was as gaunt as mine. How? That should have only taken about 25 minutes. I don't know, I replied, pocketing my phone. But we need to hurry. Zach and I took off into a dead sprint. By that point, we were somewhere close to the centre of the graveyard. Logically, I knew that we didn't have enough time to make it to the guard shack, grab the lily and place it at the statue, but we had to try. Zach was a good distance ahead of me, as expected, but I was trying my best to keep up. Headstones whirred past me in a blur as I ran, my legs begging me to stop, but I didn't. To my relief, after what felt like an eternity, Zach reached the door. He flung it open, throwing himself inside. I'd just reached it myself when Zach burst through, white lily in hand. My heart throbbed with anticipation. We were in the home stretch. I summoned every ounce of strength that I had left and pushed forward. I was utterly exhausted. An entire week's worth of creepy encounters was really starting to take its toll, but I knew that I couldn't give in. Not yet. Fortunately, the statue was only a short distance away. As its gargantuan wings came into view, a nauseating feeling twisted itself in my gut. Something didn't feel right, and I couldn't quite place it, but something about the monument felt off. My heart rate spiked as we finally drew nearer. As we closed the distance, I realized what it was. I gazed up at the mass of stone in equal parts awe and terror. Its eyes shimmered a bright red, piercing my pupils with their radiating glow. A spear in its right hand protruded from the base, while its left harboured what resembled a mirror. Stone wings sprouted from its back, lending to its incredible appearance. I'd become completely immobilized, entranced by the sight of the thing, because as I stood there, the enormous effigy began to move. Its limbs groaned as it stood from its kneeling position, looming menacingly over me. At that moment, I felt like an ant, small, insignificant, and completely at the mercy of the giant standing before me. My eyes grew wide. My fight-or-flight response had decided to completely abandon me in lieu of an alternative. Freeze. I could only stand and watch as the spectacle unfolded before me. Before I could even begin to understand what was happening, the Archangel raised its spear with one hand and swung it like a bat. My blood turned to ice when I realized who it was aiming for. Zack barely had time to react. I looked on in horror as the solid stone staff sped straight through my co-worker's face. But somehow, as if by the grace of God himself, Zack fell to the ground at exactly the right moment. I gasped as he slid like a baseball star into home plate, and he tossed the lily onto the plaque. The angel suddenly stopped. It retracted its spear and returned to its original position. The creaks and groans returned as its joints solidified once more, and the radiating red glow of its wrathful eyes was soon snuffed out. I couldn't have been happier. "Zack, you're insane. That was some quick thinking," I said, trudging up to him. He stood from the ground, dusting off his jeans. "I knew all those childhood Little League games had to count for something," he grinned. I chuckled as a wave of nostalgia jolted through me. "Yeah, I'm glad they did. And now let's go take a break. I'm beat." Friday arrived quicker than I thought it would. Leaving work early had allowed me a few extra precious hours of sleep, and I showed up that night feeling more motivated than I had in a long time. One more shift, and I would have an entire 2 days to myself. I wouldn't have been in such a good mood if I'd known what the night had in store. "Zack, how's it hanging?" I asked, strolling into the guard shack. "No complaints." "You're awfully chipper today. What gives?" "What? I can't be in a good mood every once in a while." "Geez, not saying that. It's just weird, that's all. By the way, have you taken a look at the rules for tonight yet?" I turned to him with a blank expression. "Zack, how would I have looked at the rules already? I literally just clocked in." "I'm just trying to make small talk," Zack replied. "Seeing as you seem incapable of reading them with your own 2 eyes, I'll fill you in on today's tasks," I said, snatching the piece of paper with Friday scrawled across the top of it. My brows furrowed. This one was different. Instead of the usual numbered list that I was accustomed to receiving, this one was handwritten. My confusion only deepened as I read aloud. Don't worry about the rules for today. Shah from the day shift has agreed to put in some overtime to help out. Be prepared for the exorcism." Jerry and I exchanged worried glances. I pursed my lips, slowly nodding. "Oh, I completely forgot about that. You must be sweating bullets," I said, smirking at Zack. He shifted in his chair before glancing up at me. "I mean, yeah, I'm nervous, but a bigger part of me is looking forward to it. I'm ready to have full control over my body again." "Yeah, hear that, ammo idiot. You're about to be dead," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose and shaking my head. "Zack, there are so many things wrong with that statement that I don't even know where to begin." "Like what?" he asked, staring up at me expectantly. "Like what?" "I don't know, maybe the fact that you spelled dead wrong. Also, when an exorcism doesn't kill the demon, you can't kill something that was never alive to begin with." "Oh, yeah, always right," Zack muttered. Before I could continue scolding him, the door swung open. Jerry marched through it, followed by an old man clad in black robes with a white collar. "Gentlemen, say hello to Father Abrams. He's going to be doing the honours." "Nice to meet you, boys. I wish it were under different circumstances," he said, shaking each of our hands. "Now, which one of you requires my services?" "I do," Zack squeaked timidly, raising his hand. "Yep, that's him. Now that we have all the pleasantries out of the way, let's get to it. Follow me," Jerry demanded, walking back out the door. Zack and I shot each other a nervous glance. I didn't know where they were taking us, but I had a bad feeling about it. As much as I wanted to bolt from the property, I diligently followed Jerry and the others. I still remember the feeling in the air. It was eerie, like something sinister was foreshadowing itself. I wouldn't find out until later that my intuition was correct. "Zack," I asked, cupping a hand around my mouth. "Where are they taking us?" "Heck if I know." "There's no need to whisper, boys. You'll find out soon enough," Father Abrams interjected, winking at us. "Sorry, I didn't know your hearing was that sharp," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. Zack remained silent. I chose to follow his example until we arrived. "Well, here we are, gentlemen," Jerry said, pausing before a beaten hatch just inside the cemetery's confines. The greenwood on its double doors was chipped and faded, and the handles were coated in a thick layer of rust. Zack and I exchanged glances as Jerry pulled the doors open. The hinges wheezed in protest from lack of use, and a cloud of dust billowed from the depths of the earth, winding high into the solemn night air. "Well, What are you waiting for? An invitation? Get moving, Jerry said, snapping me from my stupor. I took a deep breath before reluctantly shuffling forward. I glanced down into the abyss, unsure of what I would find. Dark was an understatement. That pit was so devoid of light that a black hole wouldn't compare to it. I gulped, wringing my hands as I turned to Jerry. Are you sure you don't want to lead the way? I don't know where I'm going. Jerry scowled at me, sending a wave of anxiety rippling through my chest. A bunch of whiny babies, he mumbled, shoving me aside and producing a flashlight. Come on, we're wasting time. Father Abrams here is paid by the hour. The priest shot Zack and me a mischievous smirk. Oh, no, by all means, please do take your time. Jerry rolled his eyes. Try to keep up and don't touch anything, got it? Zack and I nodded, whipping out our phones. We tentatively followed Jerry, illuminating our surroundings. It appeared that we were descending into a chamber of sorts. The walls were constructed from weathered beige bricks, not unlike what I would expect to find in a catacomb. The air had a musty stench to it, as if something had died and been left to rot. The ceiling dripped in several places, resulting in sizable pools of water collecting on the ground beneath our feet. Once we'd reached the bottom step, we found ourselves in a narrow hallway. Some of the stone to our sides had been replaced with glass panes. I shone my light into each one, filled with morbid curiosity. Most were occupied by some sort of relic. Some remained empty, while others ranged from daggers and gold necklaces to vials of unknown liquid. One even boasted a severed and mummified hand. Jerry, what is all this stuff? I asked, peering into a panel to my right. Cursed artifacts. Every once in a blue moon, the deceased family will want them buried with the damn things. Now, we can't have that, so instead we've got them here in reinforced displays. Don't even think about trying to take anything. That glass is nearly indestructible. I'll take that as a challenge, I said, a grin inching across my lips. Zack and Father Abrams chuckled, and Jerry didn't find it amusing. We kept walking until we reached an old wooden door. The thing looked like it might collapse at any given moment. Nathan, push that open for me, Jerry said, cracking a smile. I got a sinking feeling in my gut. There had to be some sort of catch. I eyed Jerry suspiciously before obeying his order. To my surprise, the door was heavier than a ton of bricks. By the time I was able to shove it open, I was completely out of breath. What the heck is that thing? Titanium? High-gauge steel, Jerry replied, slapping the door with a low thud that echoed down the corridor. A pretty good deterrent for degenerates like you. I shot him a glare. Yeah, no kidding. Our party proceeded into a sizable chamber while I regained my composure. I fell to the back as we made our entrance. I wanted to gauge Zack's reaction. He had been unsettlingly quiet for some time. We illuminated the confines of the room with our phone lights. It was expansive, with multiple long hallways branching off into the dark. I turned to Zack, studying his expression. His eyes darted rapidly from side to side as he soaked it all in. Hey man, are you okay? Your nerves must be shot, I muttered, placing a hand on his shoulder. You want my honest answer? I nodded. Hell no, I'm not okay. I'm in bricks right now, dude. I mean, who wouldn't be? I pursed my lips. He had a solid point. You're going to be fine. Just breathe and remember that it'll all be over soon. Zack took a deep breath, closing his eyes until he exhaled. Okay, I'll be fine. Just have to make it a little longer. Yeah, you got this, buddy. Just as I said that, the room was bathed in a warm orange glow. Jerry had lit a match and thrown it into a thin canal embedded in the ground. It spread to dozens of torches along the walls, igniting each before the maze of flames was snuffed out. Okay, that was pretty cool, I said, surveying my surroundings. Old furniture and statues littered the room, coated in a thick layer of dust. A monument of the Greek god Thanatos loomed to our left, while our right boasted an equally impressive sculpture of Anubis. A large black table sat in the centre of the room, its surface dark as obsidian. I suddenly felt a heavy weight crash into my shoulder. It was Zack. I turned just in time to see Father Abrams removing a syringe from his arm. What the hell is going on here? Why did you do that? I shouted, supporting Zack's limp form. He's got a better chance of survival if he's unconscious, Father Abrams said, his genial demeanour now gone. Help me get him to the table. I silently nodded, dragging Zack across the stone floor. What did he mean by that? He had a better chance of survival. The realization hit me like a train. There was a real possibility that Zack wasn't going to walk out of that dungeon. After an embarrassing amount of effort, we managed to lay him flat against the table surface. I glanced anxiously at my surroundings. Jerry and Father Abrams wore looks that could kill. I was getting a seriously bad feeling about the whole thing. "Nathan, take this," Father Abrams said, handing me a rosary. "I don't care if you're religious or not. Hold on to this and pray for the demon to exit Zachary's body." Father Abrams held a Bible in his hands, open to a specific page. Jerry closed his eyes, muttering under his breath. He gripped a golden cross in his left hand, and Father Abrams nodded to me. Thus, the ritual had begun. "Lord, in your righteousness, rescue this man and deliver him from evil. Turn your ear to me and save him," Father Abrams began. I squeezed my eyes shut and obeyed my orders. "Come on, Zach, you got this, buddy." My heart thundered against my ribcage. Something was happening. I stole a peek for just a moment. Zach's eyes were wide open, and they were pitch black. A nauseating smile was stamped across his lips, and veins spiderwebbed across his cheeks. A chill rippled across my body. I regretted looking. Be his rock of refuge to which he can always go. Give the command to save, for you are his rock and his fortress. Please, I don't know if anybody's listening, but if you are, I'm begging you, don't let Zach die. Tears began streaming down my cheeks. I had known him for less than a week, but as corny as it sounds, I felt like we had been through enough bonding for a lifetime. "Nathan, I would like to offer you a deal," a demented voice said. My eyes shot open. I recognized that voice. As my vision adjusted, I looked back. Everything was frozen. Father Abrams was stuck mid-shout, and Jerry's eyes were clenched shut, fervently praying. Zach's face looked like it was about to burst. Angry blue veins were protruding from his temples. "Okay, I'm listening," I said. "I want your soul. In exchange, I can make all of this go away. No more rules and no more deities. You're already damned, but there's no reason for you to refuse." I shuddered. As much as I didn't want to accept it, Amodius was right. If I could prevent even one person from facing those nightmares, it would be well worth it, and if I declined, then the boy would die. In that moment, my blood turned to ice. Checkmate. Amodius had me in a catch-22, and he knew it. "Fine, you win. You can have my soul on 3 conditions. 1, you keep your word and end all of the insane crap that we have to deal with on a nightly basis. 2, Zach lives. 3, you won't interfere with my life in any way, shape or form. No trying to get me killed or putting me in a situation where I might try to off myself. You got it?" A low chuckle echoed off the walls. I couldn't see him, but I could tell that Amodius was grinning wider than a Cheshire cat. My heart dropped. What had I just done? "You have yourself a deal. I'll see you in the afterlife." In an instant, time resumed. Father Abrams was shouting scripture, and Jerry was mumbling under his breath. A dark black cloud of smoke began pouring from Zach's mouth. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to pray and stealing occasional glances. Once the smoke had dissipated, everything fell silent. I hesitantly glanced around the room. Jerry and Father Abrams stared at Zach's motionless body. I joined them, waiting for something to happen. "Come on, Amodius. Time to make good on our bargain," I murmured. The words had barely escaped my lips when Zach shot up, gasping for air. He clutched his chest, his eyes darting back and forth between each of us. "What just happened?" "Where am I?" he asked. I didn't wait for them to give me the all-clear. I raced up to Zach and threw my arms around him. I'm ashamed to admit that I may have shed a tear or two. Nate, what are you doing, man?" "Nothing," I said, releasing him. "I'll explain everything later. I'm just glad that you're all right. You gave us a real scare for a moment," Father Abrams said, tucking the Bible underneath his arm. Jerry leaned against the wall, wearing a grandfatherly grin. I felt closer to my co-workers than ever before. I was about to chime in when I felt it. My legs started to wobble. I involuntarily placed one shaky foot in front of the other. Soon, whatever unseen force was compelling my limbs took full control, leading me toward a dimly lit hallway. "And where do you think you're going?" Jerry demanded, his signature scowl returning. I'll be right back. There's something that I want to see." I was met with puzzled gazes as I unwillingly passed by the trio. I could feel their confused stares boring into my head. I had a feeling that I knew what was going on, but I couldn't let them know about the deal that I had made. I continued down the dark, dingy corridor, brushing away cobwebs until I came to a halt before a rickety old bookshelf. The entire thing was coated in a thick layer of dust, and looked as if it would fall apart at any moment's notice. "Ammodius, why did you bring me here?" I asked. My arms mindlessly reached for a chest occupying the bookshelf. It had a metal latch, but it was so rusted and poorly maintained that it popped off the moment I laid a finger on it. I had just enough room to open the lid, reach inside, and pull out its contents. An ancient book, heavy as a bowling ball, sat in my grasp. Its pages were yellow with age, and the cover bore a golden inscription in a language that I didn't recognize. "Okay, thanks, but what do I do with this? It's in a foreign language." "Destroy the tome, only then will you be set free." The oppressive force controlling my limbs released me, and I was nearly dragged to the ground by the insanely heavy book. I sighed. I never should have cancelled my gym membership. I would be lying if I said it wasn't a rewarding feeling when I managed to lug it back. My associates were all staring at me in pure befuddlement. I couldn't blame them. I didn't do a great job of explaining myself. Even so, I knew that I was about to save a lot of people from a world of nightmares. "What is that?" Zach asked, slipping off the table. My gaze locked onto Father Abrams. His mouth was agape, and his eyes were as wide as saucers. "Where did you find that?" "In an old chest back there. I just had an urge, like a sign or something," I lied, hoping that he would buy it. "Nathan, I don't know what gave you the idea to search there, but you might have saved us from a heap of trouble down the line. Do you know what that thing is?" "No, I thought you would," I said, plopping the brick of a text onto the table. I studied the others' faces. Zach and Jerry looked equally as dumbfounded. "This is the Tome of the Damned. Supposedly, it was written in Latin in the late 16th century. It is said to be filled to the brim with sinister incantations. Honestly, I thought the vile thing was a myth. We have to destroy it." Before anybody had time to object, Father Abrams grabbed a torch from the nearby wall and set the book ablaze. It burned brightly, filling the room with smoke until it quickly simmered down into nothing more than a pile of ash. We all watched as it blackened before our eyes. Something about it was extremely gratifying, like my whole life had been one stepping stone after another leading to that moment. Once the last ember was snuffed out, the air seemed lighter, less demented. I turned to Zach, whose eyes were still plastered to the smouldering pages. I put a hand on his shoulder and lightly shook him. "Hey, we did it, too, rookies. Probably best not to talk about this to anybody but ourselves, though." "Oh, yeah? And why is that?" Zach replied, meeting my gaze. "Because nobody's going to believe us if we tell them." It's been about 6 months since that day. Even after everything we've been through, Zach decided to stick around. After all, we still make decent money, but now our job is a lot less exciting. Jerry's looking at retirement, and I can't say that I blame him. 40 years is a long career by any metric. As for me, I'm still trying to make amends for my mistakes. I know that my soul is a forfeit. Every so often, I can feel a Modius presence to remind me of that, but I don't let it get to me too much. If I can at least partially atone for the wrongs that I've committed, then I'll have a tiny shred of peace before I go. Hey friends, thank you for listening to today's story. Make sure to click the notification icon to stay updated on all future narrations. I release new videos twice every day at 10 AM and 8 PM Eastern Time. If you have a story to share, please send it to the email displayed on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like and leave an encouraging comment. It really helps me keep bringing you more narrations like this. If you'd like to support the channel even more, you can get early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.